What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast, a podcast to promote and improve your practice as an athletic trainer. Today, the clinical athletic trainer coordinators from literally around the globe are here to discuss what athletic training education normally looks like and then what it looks like now during the COVID-19 and transitioning to online. So I have Luzita Velta from the University of Virginia, I have Aoife Burke from Dublin City University, I have Valerie Pelleck from the University of Winnipeg, and Adam Naylor from the University of Bolton. So just real quick, Valerie, why don't you start us off and say hello, and if there's anything else you'd like to kind of throw out there. It's an interesting fact. Maybe you run marathons every weekend or something.
Hi there. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to do this. I don't run marathons. I don't know. I'm a graduate of the University of Winnipeg, so I went through my whole program as a student, and now I'm an instructor, which is an interesting perspective, but never had to deal with anything like this. Thank goodness, because it was a long time ago, before technology.
All right, Luzita.
Hi, this is Luzita. Nothing really interesting right now going on other than trying to figure out how to homeschool my 6-year-old son, which has been a challenge. I recognize that I've definitely gotten used to college-age students, and 6-year-olds are very different. But other than that, it's nice to talk to a fellow Texan.
Adam?
Hi, yes. Probably a similar challenge, not so much the homeschooling, but I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, so trying to balance the support of our students while looking after 2 young menaces who are running around the place. And in the meantime, just responding on your point of marathon running, I'm trying to train for Ironman at the moment. So, and at the moment, our event in the UK has not been postponed. So balancing all of that is, a bit of a challenge. But it's now great to be here, and thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. Aoife?
I suppose I haven't run any marathons, but I'm doing a Ph.D. on marathon runners and injuries. So I can take pointers from everybody here, I suppose. And other than that, just getting used to online lecturing and just life indoors, really, or at least life within 2 kilometers. So thanks for having me on and thinking of us in Ireland.
Of course. So I am the host, Jeremy Jackson, and I want to thank Jacob Resch and the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy for putting all this together. It's a really cool opportunity just to get everybody and talk about what it looks like in this crisis. So this is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/international clinical coordinator. Again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/international clinical coordinator, where I'll have links to any of the resources that they give and ways to contact each of the guests today. So, Aoife, why don't we start with you, and what does the baseline look like for you? What does athletic training, clinical coordination, education look like for you normally? And then we'll go from there.
So I suppose the normal day-to-day running would be, we have student-led clinics. So these are clinics that the students run, and then they are supervised by professional athletic trainers. And I suppose people with genuine injuries come in and have their injuries assessed by the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year students. And I suppose typically they run every day, and the students get involved in those, but they've been halted. And as well as that, we run rehabilitation clinics, which would be specific rehabilitation time slots for injured athletes, injured staff members to come in and do some targeted rehab that they wouldn't otherwise have access to a gym facility. And then, of course, there are team placements as well. So the students going out with different teams, being pitch sides, and just helping out in general in around the team performance aspects. So all of that, unfortunately, has come to a close for the past 4 weeks. So what we have done is we've tried to implement some assignments to encourage their clinical reasoning skills and encourage them to still look around the areas of traveling with teams and preparing for traveling and emergency action plans that they might otherwise not put too much thought into, but now we're really trying to drill into that so that they can see the importance of it. But it's difficult and challenging right now.
Gotcha. All right, Adam, let's slide right on over to you. What does your baseline look like? And then
just I suppose on an awareness issue, you guys have a common terminology around athletic training. Our version is sport rehabilitation. which hopefully you are sort of familiar with as well. But to be honest, it sounds very similar to Aoife's case. We do a lot of theory and practical teaching, embedding that into clinical practice. We've got a clinician-led clinic within the university that the students will rotate in and out of. It links with our conditioning suites, rehab suites, and our sports science laboratories. So we offer quite a holistic service to the public and the staff and students as well. And that's really integrated into our undergraduate and postgraduate sport rehabilitation programs. So yeah, it does sound quite similar. There are team environments that we're flooded with in the northwest of England, from rugby union, rugby league, and professional football. There are a lot of teams within our locality, and again, our students will normally get a really in-depth experience, a lot of hands-on work, a lot of understanding of how the teams run. So this balance between clinical practice and sports team environment is really at the forefront of what we normally do. And of course, we're now on shutdown, so teams have stopped, leagues have stopped, everything's kind of come to that halt, and yeah, we're at that reorganization stage of how we get through this. So very similar.
All right, Valerie?
I'd say we're similar in a lot of ways. Our athletic therapy students, they take different practicum courses throughout the year. We're fortunate because the larger group of them in the 3 different courses were actually finishing in April anyways. So they really didn't miss out on any practical experiences. Their hours were pretty much complete. Their assignments were pretty much done when this all happened. We just have our one group of practicum 3 students who are on the verge of graduating. We're just waiting for them to be able to write a practical exam in order to then graduate and qualify for our national exam. So they're the only group that's a little bit held up, but we do have students who started in January with their practicum courses. So they were all at different stages. A lot of them were waiting for our spring and summer sports to get going. So that'll be just on hold for a while. And whenever things resume, we'll just have to see what we can find. And they're the priority to get them done. And then we'll see what we can do, hopefully for the fall term, and get those students moving through. And hopefully things resume as normal with our normal clinics that they would attend, both the university clinic and then also external clinics in the community, and then sports both on campus and in external placements as well.
All right. And then so typical Texas Southern hospitality, Luzita, you'll go last there, allowing everybody else to go first. So.
Well, thanks. I think very similar to what everybody else has mentioned, at UVA, the University of Virginia, our professional athletic training program is a 2-year master's program. So it's highly condensed and it's year round. And so like everybody's mentioned, they would have the didactic component with classes. They would have the clinical components, which are on grounds or on campus, but also off grounds with, local high schools, clinics, et cetera. So, the didactics have been able to pivot pretty effectively onto an online format. Much like everybody else has mentioned, it's really the clinical placements that's really have to change. And I think one of the things that we were also having to think through a lot is that many of our preceptors or clinicians are having to think through, like, what does care look like for them now first, in figuring out how to provide patient care now via telemedicine, for example, before our students can even get engaged with that. And so there's just a lot of formulations behind the scenes, just trying to figure out what's happening. And so our students are really kind of feeling like a loss of not having those clinical placements right now, not having the opportunity to connect with fellow patients or athletes. But we're trying our best to kind of trying to find a way to give them a sense of normalcy. And like Valerie mentioned, I think that the other big thing is our practical assessments, which were going to occur at the end of the semester. We're just having to delay to future semesters when we can actually get them face to face. There are some things we can still assess practically, but I think there's still a component of the immediacy of physical face to face that I think our students really value, that we want to make sure they still get.
All right, so let's continue right there with that. What does that look like now? Are y'all actually just video calling, telemedicine with each of the athletes, or what does it look like right now for you? Luzita, you can go ahead and continue.
Well, yeah, so I don't actually have a clinical practice as a clinical education coordinator. That's just the way we set this up at University of Virginia. My primary job is teaching and clinical coordination. So I can't speak from a personal level what my practice would look like. I can tell you what our clinicians are working through, and it depends on the setting and the resources that they have. So say for University of Virginia sports medicine, they're having to figure out which is their online platform that they prefer for telemedicine. And there are some free ones that they had access to, like Doxy.me, etc. Zoom has a HIPAA compliance section. A lot of the laws in the United States have been loosened about HIPAA compliance, in part to allow people and providers to provide telemedicine support. But really they're trying to figure out, and a lot of it is about setting policy and procedures and standards and documentation. We're lucky in athletic training world, at least partially in a lot of settings, where we really don't have to bill for services. And that's usually the holdup in a lot of settings, is about the billing piece. And we really don't have that. So a lot of our preceptors and athletic trainers are just still continuing contact with the team. The sports psychologists are still doing the same, strength conditioning coaches, etc., through these individual conversation or team meetings via Zoom, those kinds of things. But I think right now they're also just trying to give them some space to kind of process and not overly, we want to give them some normalcy of getting them back to their routine, but also just being able to understand they're in a whole new world, basically.
All right, so Valerie, what does that look like for you now?
Well, because most of our students had just been on the verge of finishing their placements, they're just sort of done right now because we're an undergraduate degree. The students who were in the middle of placements, it's just on hold for now. I think like our university clinic is shut down with the entire university. So that's not an option. Our external service providers in different clinics, they do have the option of the telehealth. I don't know how busy they are. I know that a lot of them are quite stressed about what will happen with their businesses. So I think adding in a student to the mix would not work at all. And because it's so different, it would be valuable, I think, for a student to just have sort of a small taste of what they're doing to continue their business. I think maybe after this is done, or if it continues longer and we get more comfortable with, this is how things are running for now, maybe we could incorporate some student education on this sort of option. But yeah, for now, everything is just on hold for our students. And I think the longer this goes on, we'll have to maybe reevaluate just some alternative options for the students who are currently registered in the course beyond just extending their term. But we can't sacrifice the hands-on experience at the same time.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting parts, because athletic training is such a hands-on, I'm also a teacher in the high school, so I could learn to teach biology without ever having to do a hands-on skill, but there's no way I could learn to do athletic training without the hands-on skills. So Adam, what has been the best part of transitioning to an online education for you?
The best part? Well, we're about to re-engage with online classes from the 20th of April. So for the past 2 weeks where we've been on to complete university lockdown, the students have actually been on an extended Easter break, which has allowed staff that little bit of additional time to prepare resources and realign how we're delivering classes, how we're providing resources, and how we're reorganising assessments. So other than personal tutor support and individual meetings or small group meetings, we've actually not engaged with our previous format of classes as yet. But in design, I think the best parts is actually learning to be quite time efficient with what we're providing, and really thinking about what are the priority areas of information that we need for the students that will support their practical learning when we can then get face-to-face with them again. And in that sense, it's really made us think about, or at least make these students focus on their knowledge, their understanding, and the utilisation of literature and and some real strong reading around their current knowledge levels, especially with that little bit of extra time that they've got when they're stuck indoors, or they can't have the same mobility as they had before. So we're really trying to guide them a little bit more. And if we were then to take the positives of this into our future structure when we are face-to-face teaching, is taking the best parts of what we can provide online, how we can be really directive with what we want them to read, even more so than what we would be doing before, and almost have that little bit more of a progressive structure that supports the practical elements. So there's quite a lot we are taking from this. I think staff meetings online, efficiency of time, there's loads of beneficial effects of learning new technologies, which some of our staff team have got on board with really, really quickly. Some have taken a little bit more time, and I think that will hopefully make things more efficient in the future.
All right, Aoife, same thing. What do you think has been the benefit of moving in that direction?
I suppose the first benefit would be the health and well-being of our students. I suppose Ireland as a country, our healthcare system wouldn't be as strong as some other nations, and I suppose we're really working towards flattening the curve. So we're coming into our 5th week now of online learning. So we found out on a Thursday that campus is closed, everything is to be provided for online, and by that Monday then everything was online. So it was a massive crash course in our technological skill development. Like, it was a real shock to the system in trying to figure out how do you, I suppose, cater for every student, every type of learner, whether it's visual, auditory, individual or team-based, and trying to figure out how we can still meet our learning outcomes and, I suppose, provide for the students. And ultimately, I think it's been great for us. We've really developed, we've kind of, I suppose, figured out ways of improving learning and teaching as well. And I suppose interaction, making it more interactive, or at least trying to use different tools. Given the generation that we're teaching, they're very technologically advanced, very dependent on screen time, and I suppose we're kind of feeding into that now. And I've found personally that the engagement has been great, and they really appreciate, you know, the different types of online tools and resources that they can use. So yeah, it's been, I suppose, a baptism of fire, but I think it'll benefit us ultimately because the students are enjoying it, and so far they seem to be managing everything okay.
All right. So I know, Valerie, you've already said that y'all are putting off all the hands-on skills. Luzita, what are y'all doing as a clinical educator for those hands-on skills?
Well, so we've started doing some simulations via their clinical courses. So because they were taken out of the clinicals early, we've been using a thing called the clinical reasoning theater, where we have students create cases, act as actors, others are the clinicians, and they do a telemedicine visit with each other. The authenticity, you know, is not super high because it's someone they know, but at least gets them a chance, like I think Aoife said, is, you know, thinking about their clinical reasoning skills, coming up with a good differential diagnosis. And then the physical exam is really what's been interesting, right? We get to it, and really we really try to emphasize with our students, most of what you are going to do in a physical exam really has to be guided by a really great history, a good diff, and then you do what you need to do to roll in and roll out. So when we get to that, you know, they're having to think through, like, how can we use a telemedicine visit to do a manual muscle test? Is that even possible? What do special tests look like? How do we do range of motion assessment? Although it's not a perfect format, I think they can still come up with a good working diagnosis and a good next step for how they would treat that patient. And so we're just trying to get them thinking, problem solving that way. And then I know in certain classes, you know, some of our faculty are still doing assessments that can be done virtually. So that might mean they're bringing in a friend or whoever they're living in that space is going to be their patient or their model. And then they're demonstrating a goniometric assessment or a special test of some sort on that person and video recording it and uploading it someplace. Which is nice because it allows them to go back and watch themselves, which they don't get to do in real time sometimes when you're not video recording in an exam. And they can really reflect on that experience. And then it allows the preceptor some time to kind of think through, how can I give some really good directed feedback? So There's a lot of things to be done. It's just about trying to find out what works for you, not feeling overwhelmed as a professor or teacher, and just, picking something and setting very realistic expectations for the students about what they can do in that period of time until we can get back to face-to-face.
Okay. Anyone else on either the first question, which was what has been the best part, or what are you doing to encourage those hands-on clinical skills during this?
I think I would just say, kind of echo what Luzita said about just some of the, I guess, some of the other skills that can be demonstrated. I teach some other courses as well, and we just had this online taping exam, which was kind of unique and interesting, but had to be done. So we used Zoom for everyone to log in so they could be monitored, and then they each individually recorded themselves taping and doing an assessment, and then uploaded it to our learning management platform. It seemed to work fairly well. I mean, it's different when you're teaching the skill for the first time. I think that would be more difficult. This was just the examination part, but yeah, it's definitely, there are benefits to this, just learning how to use so many more tools and really being able to cater to so many different situations. Like now we would be able to, cater to students who are abroad or in different provinces a lot easier.
Yeah, one of the things that Adam said was you can do faculty meetings online, and obviously all teachers are thinking, yes, please, please. I don't have to go sit there and listen for hours at this meeting that you got one teacher asking nonsense questions. But one of the things that Lucy said was you have to get the good history. So at our school, we've had the Texas Chiropractic College, they've had students come out to our campuses once a week and help. And so one of the things that I try to do is give them an opportunity to do that. So when one of the students was evaluating me, he went straight to, well, here's how we can fix it. And then his clinical coordinator was like, did you even stop and find out what was wrong? Did you, because he was thinking, oh, well, this guy already knows what's wrong. Let me just go in there and fix what he said is wrong, instead of asking all those questions and getting a good history. And so this is a really cool opportunity for us to really reinforce you can almost figure out the injury without ever touching them. And so what are some of the ways that y'all are really enforcing that, or really encouraging that depth of the history of and the questioning to grow? Anybody?
I think what we try to do, this is Luzita, we try to reinforce this from day one, but the reality is taking a good history takes time. And a lot of times in clinical practice, our preceptors who can use a different kind of reasoning strategy because they have so much experience get there so quickly. Our students sometimes need to be able to crawl into someone's brain to understand, like, how did you get there so quickly with so few questions? So this has asked us to kind of pump the brakes, to your point, Jeremy, and kind of say, like, if you can start asking some questions out loud and then do a timeout, which is what we do a lot in the clinical reasoning theater, and articulate your thought process and how that question or that answer has started to shift your ideas of what's going on, really then it's us being able to really process like what you're thinking at the time and to really help get at any faults in reasoning processes. But it really does take time. And the nice thing about this is there's a lot more time, almost to the point where our students are going crazy. But we can take advantage of that time to really slow down and get back, like you said, to the basics. And so I think that's what we're just trying to embrace. Sometimes it drives our students nuts because they just want to get to the end point. But until they know why that patient has what they have, they're really not going to have the best intervention strategies. And so I think this has been helpful.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have 3 kids, 2 of them are in school, they're in elementary school. And sometimes we feel like there is a lot of assignments, a lot of online assignments for these kids. Like they're just kind of overwhelmed, right? Because they're stressed, they're at home, they're not in their normal routine. They're having to learn to check Google Classroom every day. The teachers are having to learn to put the schedule in there. And you got 4 teachers communicating via different whether it's Remind or text or email or phone call or Class Dojo or whatever app it is. So what Aoife, has been one of the chief concerns expressed by your students?
I suppose one of the main concerns is their prospective placements, and this is especially, I suppose, relevant for our third year students about to go into final year. So they would do an immersive placement in the first semester of their final year, and this is typically in the States, in Australia, in the UK, and right now, I suppose, and rightly so, they have some stress with that, and it's kind of just the uncertainty of it. So we're kind of trying to keep things as normal, try to prepare them and continue the process as advised by the university and the government. But other than that, their only concerns are what might happen in the end of term exam. So it goes from a practical exam to a written exam, or how their clinical hours are going to be met next semester. And we've kind of resolved this by, we kind of have 0 credit modules next year. So they'll build up their hours, or there'll be allotted times to build up their hours here. But their main concern has been typically with the placements next year, trying to figure out what they're going to do if, you know, the English clubs don't start up for the rest of the season, or they delay next season again. So ultimately they're concerned about visas and travel more than anything else.
Interesting. Adam, what do you think has been your students' biggest concern?
Mainly from our lower year groups, mainly from what we would call our level 4 and level 5 students. Our final year, our level 6 students, have, to be honest, taken this in their stride. They've finished most of their practical work, their clinical placement work. They're just finalising their dissertation projects and basically bringing all their placement information ready for Aviva, which now obviously just takes place online as opposed to face-to-face. So not a lot has changed from their perspective in terms of the format of things. The time frame has kind of brought up some worries with people trying to juggle time. That's been the main point from our final year students. But I think the key things from the lower year groups have been them understanding the change in assessments from something that was practical and Viva based now is purely Viva based, and their questions around, well, is this still fair? And those who are sort of have the thoughts of being better hands-on, are they still going to be able to be marked on their hands-on skills? So where appropriate, this has been allowed to happen in our universities, that we've had flexibility of learning outcomes, and where it feeds into a level above, then we can still embed a particular learning outcome somewhere else, as long as it's not compromising overall program outcomes. So it still gives the opportunity for those students to still show their competencies and still score with their prowess, I suppose, with how good they are hands-on. I think it's probably put a few deers in headlights, really, when students have realised they've got to purely then focus on Viva-based information justifications, and I think some of them get a little bit anxious about having to purely be assessed on that part without the hands-on practical bit. So those have been the chief concerns. But I think in the long run, and it ties into the previous question as well about the whole change in formats, really is actually benefiting their communication. So with this telehealth or online version, they've really got to improve their vocabulary and basically look at how they're interacting with the person on the other side of a screen. It's much easier for them to interact face to face because of body language and how relaxed they can be within that same setting as a person. So I think this is, first off, quite a big challenge for the less experienced students, but two, I think it'll help them grow quite a lot as well, even if they are progressing towards, if then nothing changes, we're in a telehealth world, but if, as in when things revert back to normal, if their communication skills are heightened and they're utilising a lot more resources to engage with patients, then I think they'll pick up a lot more from their subjective history taking, and therefore their thought process, again, should be a little more robust.
Very interesting. The communication skills having to change because, you do, like normally I can give somebody a high five or kind of just put my hand on their leg. Okay, well, tell me what you got going on here, and so there's that little bit of connection. But here, just you really have to make sure you're clear, make sure that you ask good questions, ask the same question multiple ways, because you can't just say, okay, does it hurt right here? Yeah, it hurts my leg. Well, but does it hurt where we're talking about? And so it's very interesting, because I haven't done any sort of telehealth up to this point with my students, so I'm still going to have to learn as well. So Valerie, what have your students over there in Canada expressed as their biggest concern?
I would say it's very similar to the others, with just concerns about placements. The ones who were scheduled to start this spring and summer, they've been pretty good about, I assume they understand the situation, why they can't start. They haven't really been emailing me or panicking too much. I'd say for specifically for our Practicum 3 students, the ones that are sort of on the verge of graduating and then writing our national exam, they're very anxious about the situation, even though, we tell them all athletic therapy students in Canada are in the same position. It's still, that doesn't matter. It's them in this moment. Some of them are on their second degree already. They're from out of province. They've sacrificed a lot to do this. So naturally, they're just really unsure and anxious about what's going to happen. Some of them have jobs lined up in the field, which probably won't happen, or they'll be delayed anyways because everything is shut down. But just, I think, a lot of disappointment as well, because they were so close to finishing. I just want to add too, though, that I think some of the concerns aren't necessarily expressed by students, but I can tell that there are these concerns. Some of them just are not as tech savvy as we think they are. They're great at using social media. And when it comes to educational platforms and troubleshooting and uploading videos a certain way, they're not always at the level that I assume they're at. So I think those are some concerns. Some of them also have internet issues, like students who live out of the big cities. They just don't have the same connection capabilities, which makes it a challenge. And I've noticed this in my other courses more so than with our practicum courses. So I think, that's just another added layer to this, where we have to sort of tailor certain things to individual needs to make sure that we can really get them the information that we're delivering.
That's interesting, because there was a high school kid that he was typing in something in the computer, and he went over and he hit caps lock and then hit then the letter and then uncaps lock. I'm like, dude, you don't know that you can just hit shift to capitalize one letter, hold it down. And, it really is, yes, they know how to use TikTok or whatever video messaging app they use, but they don't know how to use a computer well, because they couldn't use their cell phone well. That is really an interesting topic there. So Luzita, is there anything else you wanted to add about the biggest concerns from the students?
Yeah, I think to a lot of people's point, I think our students are just questioning whether or not they're going to be ready for the profession. Like, they feel that this opportunities have been taken away, and that's starting to affect their confidence. And I'm seeing this more in our first year students who are going to transition to their immersive over the summer, about really questioning, like, am I going to be ready? Am I going to get enough time? Am I going to get enough hours in? And the other thing that I think Valerie kind of hit on is also, I think we're getting at, we want to have equity when it comes to our learning experiences. And sometimes students don't have the best home environments. Sometimes students don't have access to really good quality internet. And I really know that this is going to have some financial constraints on our students long-term. Just given how many people are having to apply for unemployment or being furloughed in the United States, it's going to have some really long-term implications. So we're going to have to be really thoughtful. And I think these are things they might not be verbalizing right away, like Valerie got to, and how we're going to go about really trying to create an open line of communication so that they know that when they need to express those concerns, that they can in an environment that they know will be confidential, and that we can actually be responsive as a faculty and as a university and an institution to help get them to where they need to be. Because the last thing we would hate to have happen to anybody, but particularly as we have a student who's halfway through our program and then just can't go on because of the financial constraints. That just feels, you just feel for them. So I think that's my other big concern.
Yeah, because right now it's not like they can just find a part-time job. Well, they might be able to with Amazon, but finding a
Yeah,
part-time job to kind of make up for that lack of
right.
income. So I know
Mhm.
Aoife said that they were creating 0 credit hours for coming up, and Valerie said they were putting things on hold. But Luzita, why don't we start with you again? What are y'all doing to give the students a chance to make up those contact hours in the future, or what's the plan?
So like I said, our students would do a 6-week immersive over the summer. We can't give them a consistent and equitable experience this summer. So what we've done is pushed it all into the fall, where normally we would only do 7-week immersive. The whole full fall will now be an immersive 13-week online experience, assuming we go in the fall. It's a major assumption there too. So we're just kind of keeping our fingers crossed. Until then, we're creating a virtual clinic over the summer and trying to partner with other institutions to try to create partnerships where we can use each other to lean on to create cases and simulations that are more robust. And so that virtual clinic, it's really just trying to convince our students that this is going to can be just as meaningful as the face-to-face hands-on component. I think our students are still a little wary of it, but I do think that the frustration they're experiencing right now is perfectly natural, and us just kind of consistently just trying to provide some sense of normalcy and some opportunity for them to continue thinking through cases is kind of how we're approaching the summer until we can hopefully get people back on campus or back at their immersives. The other thing we've had to do is change some of those immersives experiences. We'd started affiliation agreements with some really great places, and we just know that that's not their priority right now. So I had to have individual meetings to revamp a clinical education plan. And they're doing pretty well with that. They just want to get back, they don't care what it is. They just want to get back now. So I think that's where we're at and what we're working through.
All right, Aoife, what do you think? What does that look like for you moving forward in the future?
Yeah, I suppose we're in a similar boat, just trying to reassure the students that, everything will work out. I suppose for the students that are hoping to travel abroad, they would be due to travel in around, August, September. And I suppose if this doesn't pan out, we just have contingency plans in place so that there would be an option to do placements in Ireland, and that might involve the virtual clinical type placements, and until the sport kind of gets back up and running in Ireland, unfortunately the sports side of things will be grounded, but their clinical reasoning skills will definitely be catered for with the virtual or the telemedicine platform. So we do have plans in place for them, but we're trying to stay, I suppose, as optimistic as possible for the students, because it's everything to them, and we can understand their passion for it. And I suppose they just hear the great stories that the previous students have coming back from their placements, and they want to experience that as well. So we're doing everything we can to help them out, and then I suppose just trying to fulfill that as much as is reasonable with the other countries. So it's difficult to say, while we're at a certain time of the virus in Ireland, it's hard to say how things will work in the States, in the UK, and in Australia. So we're in a bit of limbo, but we're staying optimistic, and hopefully they'll all get a good experience irrespective of where it is or when it is.
And it's interesting, both of you had said something about, or kind of everybody says about pushing back. But so now, if, for example, the Houston Texans, they have an NFL team here in the Houston area, and so they have an affiliation with the University of Houston Masters Athletic Training Program. And if they send 1 kid or 2 kids every semester, but now are they going to have the backed up kids? So now they're going to have to do 4 kids, or is there going to be just less opportunity because those programs can only accept so many people? And so it's going to be an interesting situation as well, just to see what that looks like going forward. All right, Adam, we'll start with you and work our way around. What is your national organization doing to accommodate the certification exams? So are they extending the deadlines? Are they decreasing the requirements? Things like that.
Our organisation is the British Association of Sport Rehabilitators, and they've been fantastic in supporting our institutions. They've had really good, clear information around what the how the expectations have been adjusted. I don't think that any standards have been lowered. It's more of a case of asking the program teams to be, I think, more mindful of all of the experience or the experiences of the students right from level 1 through level 2 and their final year, and take into account their progression, so that they are still able to meet the role delineation and the entry requirements for registration. Normally we do have a set amount of clinical hours that has been adjusted a little bit, but nothing heavily to compromise safety and to compromise competency. I think it's just put the onus a little more on the program teams to look back at previous assessments in different modules to ensure that competencies are still met. So there's been guidance, some excellent guidance, but with enough flexibility for each program across the UK, because we all have a slightly different method of approach, and it's allowed that individuality across those programs to look at the students, look at their final year students and say, well, yeah, are they still meeting the competencies to enter the profession? So as long as that's being met, then there are no particular issues or barriers to becoming registered as a sport rehabilitation practitioner. It's only when obviously those barriers are still not being met because of the current situation. So there's insufficient number of placement hours, or certain competencies have not been able to be checked, and therefore program outcomes have still not been met. But as far as I'm aware, across the country, that those situations have not arisen just yet. So I think we're still on good ground. But yeah, there's definitely been excellent support from BASRAT ever since things were starting to sort of take a turn for the worst.
Very good. I keep hearing a theme of efficiency with you, Adam, there. So you're talking about how you got to look back at the previous classes and see if we're efficient in creating that education. So I keep hearing that theme there.
There's a lot of reflective. This is very personal for me as well. I mean, I manage undergrad and postgrad courses, and I'm constantly on this reflective process. Let's look at what's being taught, how it's being taught, look at all of the learning outcomes that are being met, and how we evidence those in terms of the overall program learning outcomes, and how the students are progressively becoming the right standard and meeting what we need to be a sport rehabilitator. So efficiency and reflection, I think, are probably the sort of the big two that are sort of crossing my mind at the moment, and have done over the last couple of weeks with my module team and my academic staff. So yeah, two big ones there.
All right, so I love what Adam said about you can't really relax the hours because you need to be safe. You need to be producing good clinicians. So Valerie, what is the CAT, or the Canadian? That's Canadian Athletic Trainer. What is the board there in Canada, and what are they doing?
Yeah, so it's the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. A couple of years ago, there were some big changes that happened where they took out an hour requirement. They took out a supervisory component from being able to qualify to write your national exam. So now you just need to graduate from an accredited institution. So in some ways, this is, I guess, helped a little bit because now it's just on the institution to make sure that we're not sacrificing competencies or safety, and we can be as flexible as we can and get creative, I guess, with how we can get these students finished up and ready to certify. So for the time being, there's a national written exam that's every June and November in multiple locations. So for now, the June exam has been postponed. Not sure when it will run again. If it gets too close to the November exam, I would assume that the June exam would just be canceled and everyone would be deferred to November. So at this point, that's the only direction we have because things are just so up in the air, and it's really on the institutions to just work on how we can finish things up.
You know, in the move to the Masters of Athletic Training program, I think that was one of the things as well, is the clinical coordinators created a situation to where this is the maximum number or the recommended number of hours, instead of like you have to have at least 1,500 hours. And so they definitely increase the efficiency, because whereas I would just sit in the athletic training room doing my homework, doing my laundry or whatever it is for thousands of hours, now you're really having to maximize, okay, well, I'm here, I'm busting my butt to learn and to really put my hands on everybody to ask questions and really dig in. And so I like that this is even another opportunity for us to look, do we need all of those hours? And if we do, how are we going to really maximize them? And then hopefully these students will say, like, I don't want to be stuck at home having to do these hours. I'm going to really get into this and really learn. So,
yeah. So more of a quality versus quantity approach, and just the whole competency-based approach just really fits this a lot better.
Yes, ma'am. Lucy?
Yeah, I agree too. I think we've tried to focus on what we would call just patient encounters versus hours. We send min-maxes as well internally as a program versus our external accreditor or external agencies do that for us. But we really have 3 different agencies that have really stepped up. So the National Athletic Trainers Association has provided a lot of resources for practicing clinicians and educators. The BOC, which is our certifying body, has had to cancel the March-April window for our BOC exam, which our students would normally take, and delayed it to the summer, with the hopes that the extended window that they're providing during the summer will still be okay. I don't know what the next steps would be if given, depending on how this pandemic progresses, whether or not they'll be even able to make the summer window. But there's plenty of tests throughout the year at local testing centers. And then the CATI has basically made, which is our accrediting body for education, has made statements that have been more of, do what you need to do as a program to make changes. Just make policies that are very transparent and clear to the students, because again, it's a protection to the students. But also you can't sacrifice, to Adam's point, the quality of the experiences. So how are you still meeting your learning outcomes that you've said as a program you're going to meet? So I think everybody's really stepped up. And what I'm really been impressed with also is that a lot of these institutions have really kind of opened up their processes to others. They've shared plans, they've shared experiences, they've been multiple conversations and via multiple formats, like the AATE, the Association for Athletic Training Education, has been very open about sharing experiences. So I think what we're seeing is a coming together, which has been really good for our profession. And to Adam's point too, is about reevaluating why we do what we do. I think we had a lot of sacred cows in what our education, how it was built. And I think a lot of it just didn't make sense and didn't really serve our program or our students. So now we're having to reassess those.
All right, Aoife, what does it look like in Ireland? What have they been doing for you?
Yeah, so in Ireland, we have the Athletic Rehabilitation Therapy Association, and that's, I suppose, governs, and I think I'm on the certification committee, so we've ultimately postponed the June exam. So every year there'd be 3 exams. It'd be January, June, and August. And it's a theory element and a practical element. So the June exam has now been postponed until August provisionally. So the requirement for students to sit the exam would be to be with their final year graduation, or to have their emergency care patients and be certified there, be in date with those. So right now it doesn't look like the students will be affected in terms of becoming certified athletic therapists in Ireland in August, but unfortunately they likely won't be able to be certified in June, just with the situation at the minute. So each of the institutions, so we have 3 institutes that would educate in athletic therapy, and they've all been very understanding, and they each roll their learning outcomes and the program outcomes as well, and they've tried to meet, I suppose, the demands of the association. So far it's been very positive, and students have very much understood the reasoning for the postponement as well. So it seems to be on good terms right now.
Good. So it sounds like everybody is getting support. And also one of the cool things is that everybody is kind of collaborating and coming together. So what Luzita said was that people are just letting down their guarded things and saying, look, this works. So, that's one of the things. I was working on an online curriculum thing for my high school student athletic trainer aides, and I was already creating that, but now I've got a couple other people who are like, hey, can we help? How can we do this? And so we're going to kind of create this one thing that is easily shareable for, across the country, and people can change it as they need to, but it's like, hey, let's work together instead of just kind of everybody doing our own thing and, trying to say we're better. We're in this together. So, all right. I feel like we've kind of already covered this, but the last question Jacob had was, how is your institution managing to assess practical competencies and face-to-face opportunities are no longer available? So again, the last question is, how is your institution managing to assess practical competencies if face-to-face opportunities are no longer available? Valerie, do you have anything else to add there?
No, I think it's just it depends on the course, either deferring them until a later date when we can do it properly with the right models and equipment, or using Zoom plus some form of video or our learning platform to be able to properly assess the student.
Adam, you got anything different there?
No, I just think it's learning outcome based. If it's a competency, of course, it needs the right equipment and the right environment, and I don't think we should really compromise on those things. I don't think there's any point in doing something halfway or half-hearted. It's worth deferring that and bringing that up later, and just making it fit still to the progression of learning. But where a learning outcome is more geared towards understanding, justification, then even though it's linked to a practical situation, I think we still go ahead and achieve those learning outcomes and keep the students' progression of learning moving. I think it's just a case of looking at it on an individual case or individual basis like that.
Aoife?
Yeah, and that's similar to Adam and Valerie. We kind of deferred practical exams where appropriate, and then we considered doing some Zoom videos to check competencies, but it's probably to try and keep it fair across the board for all the students. Not everybody would have sound internet access, and with social distancing and quarantine, not everybody might have access to somebody to practice on or somebody to record, etc. So we've tried to defer the most, I suppose, necessary practical exams, and those then that we can still meet our learning outcomes and our requirements without doing the practical assessment. We've found alternate assessments there.
All right, and then Luzita, you got anything else to add?
No, I think everybody's covered it really well.
Fantastic. Okay, so I have everybody's email, and I'll include those in the post with this. Again, it'll be sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/international clinical coordinator. Again, this would be sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/international clinical coordinator. And so if there's another way that you want somebody to get a hold of you, then you can share that here. But Luzita, are you good with the email?
That's great.
Yes. Aoife?
Yeah, perfect.
Adam?
Fine by me, yeah.
All right, and Valerie?
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so again, I'll share those there in the post. Again, this is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/international clinical coordinator, as we're learning to deal with the online education and transitioning during the COVID-19. And I love the reflection that Adam mentioned and just increasing the efficiency. So, so again, thanks for the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy for connecting us and putting us together and just helping us grow as a profession. So for Jeremy at WFATT, Dr. Luzita Felta at UVA, Aoife Burke in Dublin City, Adam Naylor at Bolton University, and Valerie Peck at University of Winnipeg. And the Sports Medicine Broadcast, that is a wrap. Thanks, guys.